Golden Sun has been one of my favorite RPGs pretty much since I started playing them. Released in 2001 by the Nintendo-affiliated Camelot Software Planning, the game was a throwback in a lot of ways, an isometric 2D experience in a world already used to 3D visuals, with simple turn-based combat of the kind that Chrono Trigger had made obsolete 6 years before, and a straightforward story that featured practically no philosophizing, personal melodrama, or shocking twists at all. You might wonder, given the laundry list of features that Golden Sun doesn't have, what this game actually does have that makes it great. The answer to that question is that the devil is in the details. Golden Sun is a game that does a lot of little things really well. The game is full of interesting dialogue and flavor text, including a lot of nods to real-life history and geography. The story is relatively simple, but it features characters who get enough development to seem like real people, instead of two-dimensional cliches. And sure, the turn-based combat is pretty simplistic, but a unique class system based on equipable Jinn does a lot to give the player options in battle and make the fights feel dramatic. As a result, Golden Sun has a unique appeal for its time. It's a Breath of Fire or a Dragon Quest for gamers who were too young to grow up with those series. And if the Game Boy Advance had never existed, I'm pretty sure I would never have had the chance to play it. So in case the title didn't clue you in, this is actually not a video about Golden Sun, though believe me, that's brewing in here somewhere. This video is about the console that Golden Sun came out for, and its whole extended family of portable Nintendo consoles, from the Game Boy to the 3DS. Because the thing is, based on what I've been hearing pretty much since the Switch first came out, there are a lot of people who think Nintendo only needs one console and one set of customers to keep it going, and that might include Nintendo itself. Consider this video the long version of my rebuttal to that particular point of view. The short version, in case you're wondering, is this.
What's wrong with you?
Nintendo has had both home and portable game systems for literally as long as I can remember. Even before the Game Boy, Nintendo dabbled in the portable market with products like Game & Watch, so technically, portable Nintendo systems have a pedigree that goes back even before the NES. After the debut of the Game Boy in 1989, Nintendo's home and portable consoles spent a few decades settling into unique niches in the market. The home console was for serious gamers, likely not just fans of video games, but big fans of Nintendo specifically. This was the console that attracted gaming's major demographic, which has traditionally been teenagers and young adults. The portable console was something else entirely. Cheaper, simpler, more toy-like. Partly because of this lack of complexity, it appealed to a broader demographic. If you were a teenage Nintendo fan in the early 1990s, you probably played on the SNES, but your 6-year-old kid brother, your mom, maybe even your grandparents would fire up the Game Boy. That was the way things were for nearly 30 years. And then something terrible happened. In 2017, Nintendo released the Switch and it became a huge financial success. Okay, maybe terrible is the wrong word. Actually, the Switch has done a lot of good for Nintendo and its fans. The problem is not so much the Switch itself as the attitude that the Switch's success gave rise to. You see, the Switch is a home console that's also portable. Essentially. I could pick some holes in its portability, but that would just annoy everybody and make this video longer than it needs to be. So for the sake of the argument, let's just say that the Switch is as portable as anything else. One of the first things commentators started saying after the release of the Switch was that its portability put it in direct competition with the 3DS, and that since the Switch's games would naturally be superior, the 3DS no longer had a reason to exist. That argument died down a little when major 3DS games continued to come out through 2017, but the recent release of the Switch Lite, a Switch that is nothing but portable, has started this discussion all over again. A number of prominent internet personalities have either predicted that Nintendo is going to abandon the two-console system, or urged it to do so. Or both. Their general line of argument is that portable consoles were always just a pale imitation of what the home console could do, and now that a home console is portable, Nintendo should focus all its resources on that single system to the exclusion of all else. While I can kind of get where these people are coming from, in my opinion they're so far off base they're practically in the dugout. There are a lot of reasons for Nintendo to keep the focus of the Switch at home, and preserve the portable market as it has been, and I'm going to start picking apart this perspective by bringing up one of its most basic problems. When I say power here, I'm not talking about battery life, although that can certainly be an issue. What I'm talking about is sheer processing power. The fact is that to make a console portable, you have to cut its size considerably, and that means sacrifices in performance. Even the Switch, which admittedly makes an impressive showing, is pretty severely limited in the kinds of games it can play well. It's no surprise that some of the most hyped releases on Switch so far have been PC games from several years ago, and indie titles. The Switch could probably never play a game like Bloodborne without running into horrible performance issues. Heck, even Nintendo's first-party titles, which were presumably designed with the Switch's specs in mind, have trouble running on it sometimes. Breath of the Wild was the first Zelda to have frequent frame drops, and even freezing in some areas, and while that's not so unusual for an open-world game, it's incredible for a Nintendo game. There's an aesthetic component to this problem, too. Modern games are technically complicated, in part because developers want them to look good, but when you're looking at a 5.5-inch screen, it's a little difficult to appreciate all those fine details. There's a trade-off here between portability and aesthetic considerations that is, for the most part, unresolvable. And speaking of trade-offs, playing a game on the go when it was designed to be played on a home console introduces another problem, the difficulty of immersing yourself in an experience that keeps getting interrupted. Portable games have a hard time immersing anybody because of the way people play them. When you're playing on the go, it usually means you're in public and probably don't have much time on your hands. After all, if you had several hours to do nothing but play games, you would probably be at home. Even when you do have a long stretch of time ahead, like on a plane trip for instance, there are always distractions to pull you out of the experience. I mean, even if you don't have a screaming baby in the next aisle, or a 9-year-old kicking the back of your seat every 5 minutes, the mere fact that you're sitting in an uncomfortable chair with armrests the size of chopsticks is probably enough to make true immersion impossible. Well, guess what? When you play a home console game on the go, you deal with all the same problems. In fact, it's worse, because you're trying to play a game that wasn't designed to be played under these less-than-ideal circumstances. This problem was already noticeable in a lot of 3DS ports of home console games, and the tricks that were used to make them playable, like quick saves for instance, completely change the character of a game. In the worst case, you end up with an experience that feels shallow and fake, completely obliterating the point of playing these games in the first place. So that's 2 reasons why home consoles should stay at home. But really, when you get right down to it, these aren't the things that have me worried. Switch games still can be played at home in a way that enhances the experience instead of detracting from it. The real problem is the possibility of losing a unique platform that has its own merits, the dedicated portable console itself. This would be a tragedy for everybody, not just the portable gamers, and here's why. Like every other kind of entertainment, video games don't exist in a vacuum. They're always being influenced by new technological developments, new stories from real life or other media, and yes, even the fads and fashions of pop culture. Game developers are under constant pressure to make games on the cutting edge of what's popular right now, and this is especially true for home console games. Portable consoles, on the other hand, have a built-in excuse for not keeping up with the latest tech or the latest fads. They can't. This is often seen as a shortcoming of portable systems, but in my opinion it's one of their greatest strengths. They may be stuck in the past, but home consoles are just as stuck in the present, and the past has a lot more great games to take inspiration from. Golden Sun is great not just because its creators worked hard, but also because they were able to draw on more than a decade of 2D RPG design for their own project. Direct ports of older games were also present on portable consoles long before they hit the mainstream home console market. Nintendo, as the dominant force in portable gaming, was responsible for many of these re-releases of older games, and I think that played a significant part in establishing its reputation as a company that respects its own history and preserves a sense of continuity within its franchises. But I know what you're thinking. Wait just a minute, Coffee Cup Man. This complaint is totally outdated. Ports and old-fashioned retro experiences may have been rare once upon a time, but now we have home console ports and indie games to pick up the slack, so why don't you just play those? I can certainly see where that line of thinking is coming from, but here's where it goes wrong. A few months ago, I mentioned in my Indie One-Hit Wonders video that modern indie developers have a nasty habit of getting stuck in a rut as soon as they have one major success. It's distressingly rare for an indie studio to have 2 hit games, let alone 2 hits in substantially different genres. One of the major factors behind this stagnation, as far as I can tell, is that indie developers tend to be amateurs and not professionals. The great portable games I've been talking about were generally made by medium to large-sized studios, often studios that made home console games at the same time. These were big names with big reputations to uphold: Square Enix, Capcom, Ubisoft, and so on. Making games was their full-time job, and they weren't afraid to dabble in many different genres because they'd already done it before in the home console market. Indie devs, on the other hand, tend to be short-staffed, inexperienced, and distracted by lots of conflicting obligations, often including the dreaded day job. What's more, since many of them are driven by the need to have a hit game in order to keep the studio going, their games can be just as topical and fad-driven as the product of your typical AAA studio. Shovel Knight was an indie game, sure, but so was No Man's Sky. I think if any of us are counting on indie studios to make the kind of games that used to appear on portable consoles, we're expecting too much from them. Or maybe too little. Most of these developers release their games on the PC, in many ways the least technologically limited of all platforms. I don't expect them to handcuff themselves to retro nostalgia and ignore every innovation from the last 2 decades of gaming. And honestly, I wouldn't want them to either. So no, indie studios can't make up for what portable gamers would lose if the portable console disappeared. But even this isn't the worst of it. There's one more thing that the portable market provides that is irreplaceable, not just for the people who buy and enjoy portable games, but for anyone who cares about games at all. When you look at the portable gaming market from one angle, it's easy to think of it as a cheap knockoff of the home console market. Portable versions of console games like Donkey Kong Country, Mega Man, and Rayman are really more like stripped-down reimaginings that trade on the original's iconography in order to market a totally unrelated experience. Like with the Nintendo Wii, the tide of licensed games and bad ports has sometimes come close to wrecking the reputation of these consoles. Looked at from another angle, however, portable games have the potential not only to stand on their own, but even to come up with ideas so good that the home games start following their example. The portable market is cheaper, more old-fashioned, and more stylistically diverse than the home market. This gives the developers who work in it a freedom that would be envied by any game designer. In a way, systems like the Game Boy and DS acted as incubators for new game ideas that would go on to major success in the mainstream later on. In fact, some of the greatest home console games ever made have had roots in the portable market, especially the ones made by Nintendo. To find out just how far this influence goes, let's examine a group of Nintendo's most iconic characters and the franchises they call home. Quite a motley assortment, aren't they? Not much of a surprise, since Nintendo has been creating intellectual property for more than 3 decades. You would probably imagine that most of these characters come from home console games originally, since the home console is always the flagship product for a video game company, right? Well, why don't we see what happens to this group when we eliminate the influence of portable gaming? So right off the bat, we have to get rid of Pokémon. That was a franchise that started on the Game Boy, and has had its main entries on portable consoles ever since. We've only just started, and already Nintendo's biggest media franchise is off the table. Next, we have to get rid of WarioWare, one of Nintendo's funniest and most diverse franchises, because it started on the Game Boy Advance. In fact, Wario himself has to go. He was introduced in Super Mario Land 2 for the Game Boy. Which of course means no Waluigi, and that means he'll never be in Smash. Just terrible. We can't hold on to the massive Kirby franchise either. His first game was the Game Boy release Kirby's Dream Land, and without Kirby, Masahiro Sakurai would never have risen through Nintendo's ranks, which means no Smash Brothers. Now Waluigi will double never be in Smash. Dang. As for Mario, Zelda, and Metroid, they're still hanging on, but without portable systems, they're missing some of their greatest work. Zelda loses Link's Awakening and both of the Oracle games, and without that GBA port of A Link to the Past, a lot of people, including me, never play it. Metroid misses out on Return of Samus, Metroid Fusion, and its brilliant remake of the original Metroid. And Mario... oh man, it's just too sad to contemplate. Even outside Nintendo, without portable gaming spicing things up, many major franchises suffer. The Castlevania series loses every Metroidvania aside from Symphony of the Night. Tetris loses the best-selling version of itself, and likely gets forgotten in the march of time. Without the Ivalice Alliance inspired by Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, it's likely the epic Final Fantasy XII is never made. And I think we can all agree that Kingdom Hearts wouldn't be the glorious continuity mess that it is without Chain of Memories. Portable and home consoles are separate spheres, but they influence each other a lot more than most people think. It's precisely because they have different design needs that each one is able to bring a fresh perspective to the other, and that makes both systems stronger. Try to mush them together into one system, and I think you'll find that the unique advantages of both are lost. I realize that critics of the portable market bring up a few points that can't just be waved aside. Mobile gaming did eat pretty heavily into the market for portable consoles, and the huge profits generated by an app like Pokemon Go must be awfully tempting to a company that's in doubt about its financial future. But I think these doomsayers are radically underestimating how much of a success the 3DS really was in the end. There has never been a portable system in Nintendo's entire history that failed to make a substantial profit and enhance the company's reputation, which is certainly more than you can say for its home consoles. However much the home console partisans want to pretend that they're the only true fans, portable gaming has been bringing home the bacon for Nintendo for more than a quarter of a century. Portable gaming has a unique appeal for gamers who aren't interested in every passing trend that seizes the industry for a year or so and then disappears. That's why sales of portable consoles have been so consistent, while the fortunes of home consoles keep lurching up and down. It's still an important market with a large audience, and for any company to allow it to stagnate would be criminal, let alone the company that practically created it to begin with. I've heard some people, claim that if Nintendo stopped making a portable system with its own library of games, it could pour those resources into the home console and make it something truly wondrous to behold. I wish I could be that optimistic, but if the Switch's lineup for last year, when almost no major 3DS releases came out, is any indication, then the energy lost by the 3DS isn't being picked up by anything else. It's just dissipating. And anyway, I think this attitude misses the point in a big way. Nintendo has managed to produce more great games for both home and portable consoles than any other developer during most of the last 30 years. Having two consoles to take care of didn't divide Nintendo's strength. It just gave them twice as many opportunities to work their magic, and they've only been stronger and more popular as a result. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe now, at a time when Nintendo has lost some of its greatest luminaries and had its corporate structure shuffled around by an accountant, it really is true that Nintendo has to cut something just to be able to keep up with other companies on the home console front. But if that is true, it's not exciting or inspiring. It's sad. Nintendo wasn't worried about keeping up before, and its managers were proud of their status as leaders of the portable gaming market. For 3 decades, Nintendo managed to have great games on 2 consoles, and now it can only manage 1? I frankly can't believe that about a company that still has so much talent to tap, so many subsidiaries full of creative ideas, and such critical and popular acclaim to sustain it. They can make a true successor to the 3DS, and they can make it successful. All they have to do is work at it. And if they're too busy trying to hit the mobile game jackpot or making some hacky Mario animated film to take the time to support the only part of their business that's reliably made money since it began, then they really have lost their way.